Imagine living in a country where the minimum wage doesn't cover a single meal, where money is worth less than the paper it's printed on, and where millions of people flee every year in search of survival. This place exists, and it's right next door. Venezuela, a country that was once considered one of the richest in the world, home to the largest oil reserve on the planet, and that today has become a portrait of hunger, misery, and corruption. How did a nation that had everything to succeed reach this point? That's what you're going to find out in today's video. So stay with me until the end of this video, and welcome to Venezuela, a completely bankrupt country. Imagine a country that just a few decades ago was seen as one of the most prosperous in the world. Venezuela was once considered the great example of wealth in Latin America, a place where the future seemed promising and full of opportunities. In the 1950s, for example, Venezuela's per capita GDP was among the top 4 in the world, even ahead of countries like Canada and Sweden. So it wasn't just the richest nation in the region, it was a reference for development worldwide. In the 1970s and 80s, Venezuela's image was that of a true tropical paradise closely associated with luxury. The country became famous for extravagant consumption. Venezuelans were known as some of the world's biggest whiskey enthusiasts. It was even common to see bottles of the most expensive brands circulating among the local elites. And it wasn't just that. Cities like Caracas showcased luxurious hotels, bustling casinos, high-end restaurants, and a nightlife that attracted many tourists. The purchasing power of Venezuelans was one of the highest in South America at that time. This scenario created a sense that Venezuela was destined to become a global power. After all, besides having immense natural beauty, they had one of the largest energy resource riches on the planet. The country had everything to succeed, but what was a symbol of progress became, over the decades, a portrait of decay. The same Venezuela that flaunted luxury and prosperity is now home to one of the largest economic and social crises in world history. The difference is vast, from a land of abundance and luxury to a country where millions of people can't even secure one meal a day. This is enough to understand why Venezuela draws so much attention. It's not just about a country that became poor. It's the fall of a nation that was once extremely rich and within a few decades plunged into complete chaos. It's an example of how bad governance and economic dependency can destroy even the most promising stories. Nowadays, the reality in Venezuela is the complete opposite. Out-of-control inflation, worthless currency, scarcity of basic necessities, failing public services, and millions of people leaving their homes and even going to other countries just to try to start over. The minimum wage doesn't cover a single meal, supermarkets have empty shelves, and the population, in many places, survives through improvisation and even external aid. But the inevitable question that remains is, how did a place that was once so rich, with so much potential, end up becoming all of this? And one of the things that explain this failure is oil. If there's one resource that has marked Venezuela's history, that resource is oil. The country simply holds the largest proven oil reserve in the world, about 300 billion barrels. To give you an idea of the magnitude of this, it's almost 20% of all global reserves. It's larger than Saudi Arabia itself. This colossal wealth gave Venezuela an unparalleled advantage. For decades, oil was the foundation of the country's entire prosperity. The fuel was so abundant and so cheap there that it became a national symbol. Filling up a car's tank cost the equivalent of a few reais. At certain times, fueling an entire vehicle was cheaper than buying a bottle of mineral water, but this gift of natural wealth also brought with it a very big problem: the almost total dependence on this single commodity. Let me explain. In short, instead of using the oil money to diversify the economy and invest in other things like technology, education, agriculture, Venezuela concentrated practically all its efforts solely on oil. The result was a fragile economy that breathed to the rhythm of the barrel price in the international market. Economists know this phenomenon as the Dutch disease. In summary, when a country discovers and intensely exploits a very valuable resource, it may end up neglecting other sectors of the economy. This generates very rapid growth, but is not very sustainable. When international prices are high, the flow of money seems endless. But when these prices drop, the whole system collapses. And this shows how fragile and unbalanced this system is. And that is exactly what happened in Venezuela. When oil was generating billions, the Venezuelan government used that fortune to fund social programs, distribute benefits, subsidize products, and maintain an apparently comfortable life for the population. Many Venezuelans received houses, cheap food, and even easy access to basic services. But this is very fragile. The system only worked when oil was very expensive. With the drop in barrel price, the main source of revenue dried up, and instead of adjusting spending and cutting some excesses, the government maintained the same spending pattern. The solution they found to sustain all this was to start printing more money. And this practice, known as uncontrolled money printing, might seem like a short-term solution, but the future consequences will be devastating. The result was what we call hyperinflation, which is when prices rise so quickly that the currency completely loses its value. To give you an idea, while some countries faced inflation of about 5 to 10% in 2021, which is already a bad scenario, Venezuela recorded something around 1,000,000% in 2019. This means that a product that cost $15 at the beginning of the year could cost $150,000 or even much more just 12 months later. In practice, money became useless. The notes, which theoretically represented value, became worth less than the paper they were printed on. Entire families had to carry backpacks of money just to buy bread, rice, or something much more basic. The most striking scene of this period was the photos of mountains of money, a very sad portrait of what the country ended up becoming. And the population, of course, sought alternatives. They began to replace it with the US dollar or even the Colombian peso in some border regions. It's as if they were abandoning their own monetary identity. And this hyperinflation affected not only prices, but the entire functioning of society. The minimum wage became worth so little that it didn't even cover the cost of a meal. The market and commerce collapsed, businesses closed down, and the middle class, which was once a symbol of wealth and consumption, practically disappeared. But this crisis goes far beyond food. Cooking gas, for example, became a luxury. Many families report going up to 2 weeks without gas, waiting for a refill. During this period, they improvise stoves, cook on makeshift fires, or even rely on help from neighbors and relatives. Electricity also suffers from constant blackouts, and in various regions, the lack of running water has become part of the routine. Hospitals lack medication, and many Venezuelans cross borders to buy medicine in neighboring countries like Colombia or Brazil. Others end up resorting to home treatments or simply go without care. The physical impact of this tragedy is very significant. In 2018, data shows that about 64% of the population lost an average of 11 kilos due to lack of food. The circulating images reveal increasingly thinner people, entire families reducing the number of daily meals, an unthinkable scene in a country that was once a symbol of abundance and wealth. And yet, it is remarkable how resilient the people are, and how hospitable and nice they are to those who come from outside. They are a people who refuse to lose their humanity even in such a critical situation. When food is scarce, wages are worthless, and basic services cease to function, we are no longer facing a mere economic crisis. What is happening in Venezuela is, above all, an unprecedented humanitarian crisis. Desperation has pushed thousands of Venezuelans out of their homes. It's estimated that over 7 million people have left the country in recent years. A number so large, it even surpasses the number of refugees from Ukraine in the midst of conflict. Entire families are separated. Parents cross borders in search of work, while children and relatives stay behind waiting for some money sent from abroad. Bridges connecting Venezuela to Colombia, for example, have become corridors of survival. Every day, thousands of people cross on foot, carrying suitcases, bags, or even just the clothes on their backs. And it's so sad to see this because Venezuela is such a beautiful country with many natural wonders. Caribbean beaches with crystal clear waters, stunning tropical forests, mountains that touch the clouds. There, for example, is Angel Falls, the world's highest waterfall, with almost 1,000 meters of free fall. It's a natural spectacle that, in other times, attracted tourists from all over. But all this contrasts starkly with the country's sad reality. The story of Venezuela is not just about a neighboring country that collapsed. It's also a warning to the entire world. The first lesson is about economic dependence. Relying almost entirely on a single resource, like oil, may seem advantageous when prices are high. But reality shows that this bet is extremely risky. An economy needs to be diversified, capable of sustaining itself even when one sector is in crisis. Otherwise, what should be a blessing becomes a trap. What really makes a difference is how the government manages these resources. And in Venezuela, they've always done it very poorly. And this continues to be done in the same way to this day. Successive governments full of corruption do not serve the population and are not willing to detach themselves from power. This is very important because we have to think that they do not serve the population. They do not represent the people, and they continue to make the same mistakes year after year. There's also the issue of institutional stability. Without democracy, transparency, and responsible policies, any wealth can be lost. The fall of Venezuela shows that governments prioritizing immediate benefits, without considering long-term consequences, end up leaving deep scars on the country. And the last thing we can learn from Venezuela is about the resilience of its people. Even in the face of hunger, lack of basic services, and mass exodus, Venezuelans show a lot of hospitality and solidarity with various people. This shows that even within political and economic chaos, there is still hope and human strength. Well, Venezuela reminds me that today's wealth does not guarantee tomorrow's well-being, and that a country's future depends above all on the choices it makes in the present. Thank you very much for watching until now. My sincerest thanks to you for staying with me. I'll see you in one of these videos appearing on your screen.